What's the creepiest unsolved mystery you can think of? Story 1. In 1912, a little boy named Bobby Dunbar vanished while on a trip with his family to their cabin in the Louisiana swamps. He had gone exploring with his brother and some family friends, but when they returned, Bobby was gone. A massive search began, including blowing up parts of the swamp with dynamite to reveal bodies underwater, and even cutting open alligators to see if he'd been eaten, but nothing turned up. A year later, a boy matching Bobby's description was found in Mississippi, with a man who insisted it wasn't Bobby, just a boy who looked similar. The Dunbars were contacted, and the mother insisted it was her son, even though the child didn't seem to recognize her or show any emotion. A custody battle followed. The boy's biological mother, poor and lacking legal power, was up against the wealthier Dunbars. The judge sided with the Dunbars, and the boy lived the rest of his life believing he was Bobby. Many decades later, one of his descendants took a DNA test and it didn't match the Dunbar family. The boy they raised as Bobby was Tim. The real Bobby Dunbar has never been found. Story 2. Marilyn Bergeron was a vibrant, multilingual music lover who moved from Quebec City to Montreal in 2005. A few years later, without much explanation, she moved back home to live with her parents. Her family could immediately tell that something was deeply wrong. Marilyn was visibly distressed but refused to explain what had happened. She assured them it wasn't about a relationship, medication, or money troubles. When her mother gently asked if she'd been assaulted, Marilyn started crying but said nothing. A friend who pressed her for details was only told, "It's worse than abuse, worse than witnessing a crime." One evening, Marilyn went for a walk and never returned. There have been scattered, unconfirmed sightings over the years, but none recently. This mystery poses two haunting questions, not just where is Marilyn Bergeron, but what happened to her in Montreal that was so traumatic, she couldn't even speak of it. Story 3. Christine Skubish was driving through a remote area of California with her 3-year-old son, Nick, in the back seat. It was dark and unlit along the stretch of Highway 50. Several drivers called police to report seeing a naked woman lying on the side of the road, unmoving, face down. Police searched the area that night but found nothing. They returned the next morning once daylight came. That's when they discovered Christine's car, wrecked at the bottom of a steep embankment. She had died on impact, still strapped into her seat, fully clothed. Her son, miraculously, was still alive, crying in the back. Police insist the woman spotted the night before couldn't have been Christine. She hadn't moved, and the crash site was completely hidden from the road. She couldn't have possibly made it back up the hill after dying on impact, but Christine's family believes that was her spirit, appearing to help save her son. Story 4. 3 women. Cheryl Levitt, her daughter Susie Streeter, and Susie's friend Stacy McCall vanished without a trace from their home in Springfield, Missouri in 1992. The house itself showed no signs of struggle. Their purses were still there, beds made, TV on. It looked like they'd stepped out briefly and never came back. A popular theory goes like this. Someone unscrewed the porch light to avoid being seen, dropped the globe by accident, which shattered, and rang the doorbell. One of the women may have opened the door to investigate and was met by an armed intruder. It's possible they were forced to leave in their pajamas and loaded into a vehicle, possibly a green van that was reported in the area. There was also a bizarre story involving a psychic who claimed the women were buried under a parking garage. That theory gained online traction, but has never been supported by any evidence. To this day, there's no trace of the Springfield 3. Story 5. Everyone seems to know what happened to Joshua Maddux, and yet nothing was done about it. He vanished in 2008. Years later, his body was found upside down inside the chimney of an abandoned cabin. A heavy wooden board had been placed over the bottom of the chimney, effectively trapping him. The official story was that Joshua had climbed down the chimney and accidentally gotten stuck, but that explanation made no sense. How could he have placed the board after entering? Why would he even attempt to go down the chimney? His body showed no signs of trauma consistent with that theory. Then someone on Reddit, reportedly from Joshua's hometown, shared that a man named Andy, who was known to be mentally unstable and violent, had bragged about killing Joshua. Multiple people told the police exactly who had done it, but still, no charges were filed. Joshua's case remains unsolved, and to many, painfully obvious. Story 6. I am a chemist, so I regularly skim academic papers related to my work or my general curiosity. A few years ago, I came across a paper on human waste recycling. At first glance, it sounded routine, maybe wastewater management or biomedical disposal. But once I actually read beyond the abstract, it became clear they weren't talking about ordinary waste. They were describing the chemical breakdown of human cadavers for the purpose of reusing the extracted molecules. The experimental section was shockingly detailed. The process involved dissolving the bodies in concentrated sodium hydroxide, extracting the components and purifying them oversimplified, but that's the gist. This was around 2017. Fast forward to the pandemic. I wanted to show the paper to a new intern. Suddenly it was gone. The author's information, their previous work, references scrubbed from every database I checked, like it never existed. A Chinese colleague casually told me, "Oh, the CCP sometimes erases research so they can use the ideas privately," which implies, though I can't say definitively, that this method might have been used during COVID for large-scale corpse disposal. I don't know if that's true, but the thought alone has stuck with me ever since. Story 7. The Jack family disappearance has always unsettled me. Ronnie Jack was struggling to find work and one night met a stranger at a bar who claimed to have a job for him at a logging camp. When Ronnie worried about providing for his wife Doreen and their 2 boys, Russell and Ryan, the man told him to bring them along. He said Doreen would have a job too, and they even had childcare available. The stranger told him to go home, pack immediately, and leave with him that same night. So this family of 4 got into a car with a man they barely knew and vanished. No one ever saw them again. No traces, no belongings, no sightings, nothing. Investigators later confirmed that no logging camps in the area were hiring. No one recognized the stranger Ronnie described. What makes it so disturbing is the motive. Why take everyone? Killing one adult is one thing, kidnapping children is another. But an entire family, taken by one man? It doesn't make sense from any logical angle, financial, criminal, or otherwise. It's like they just slipped off the face of the earth. Story 8. The Max headroom incident still creeps me out because of how sophisticated it was for the pre-digital era. Someone managed to interrupt 2 Chicago TV broadcasts with a bizarre, unsettling video of a person in a Max headroom mask, and to pull that off back then, they had to physically overpower the broadcast signal, not hack software physically hijack the transmission. And they were never caught. Years later, I read a Vice article where a journalist tracked down some guys in a Chicago suburb who claimed they knew the real perpetrators. According to the article, the hijackers had access to unusual broadcast equipment through an older relative. They couldn't transmit live, so they recorded their video on VHS and used old railroad tracks as an improvised antenna to blast the signal hard enough to override the stations. No names were revealed. The writer said he'd never expose who they were, and the people involved have kept their secrets for decades. That mystery and the fact they pulled it off with analog gear and teenage nerve is what makes it terrifying. Story 9. I still think about this. Why did my step-grandparents have a small room in their attic with a lock on the outside of the door? It didn't help that my step-grandfather had obvious psychopathic traits, the kind you notice even without a diagnosis, and most of his children and grandchildren cut ties with him entirely. He worked for the railroad, which meant he could travel freely and anonymously from state to state during the era when America's worst serial killers were active. So I can't help wondering, was he just a cold, unpleasant man, or was there something much darker behind that locked room? If he ever gives a deathbed confession, maybe well no. If he doesn't, I am not sure whether it'll be because he feels no remorse or because he thinks he never did anything wrong. Story 10. This one isn't as gruesome as some others, but it haunts me. Ben McDaniel was a cave diver who decided to make an unsanctioned dive into an underwater cave system. He never resurfaced. At first, people assumed he died in the cave, but expert cave divers with decades of experience searched every possible passage multiple times. They didn't find a body, gear, clothing, or any sign that he drowned there. They're adamant they do not believe he's in that cave. So what happened to him? Did he surface and disappear willingly? Was he harmed? Did something else occur? To this day, nobody knows. He simply vanished into a cave system, or maybe out of it. Story 11, this guy Chance Engelbert went missing in Gering, Nebraska, while visiting his in-laws in 2019. He went to his in-laws with his wife and 3-month-old baby for the 4th of July. On the 6th, he went golfing with his FIL and BL, then called his wife to pick him up over comments made about his new job. When they got back to the house, Chance got out of the car and started walking off. His wife called him, no answer, so she went looking. He answered her call later, saying he was walking south. Later, friends said he was walking north. The last person he talked to was a friend on the phone, and then he sent his aunt a weird message. A storm rolled in, and laws looked for him, called law enforcement. There's been multiple alleged sightings in NE and WY. Some people suspect the wife's family has him under their driveway. Story 12, the Isdal woman. If you don't know the case, it's a woman whose body was found partially burned in a fire in a remote part of Norway in 1970 with barbiturates in her system. She wasn't dressed appropriately for the area she was in. The thing is, everything leading up to that point is so weird and mysterious. She was traveling around different hotels, putting on different accents and wearing disguises, and then she was spotted being followed by sinister-looking men. The police also found 2 suitcases belonging to her that contained money from all over the world, wigs, as well as clothing that had all identifying marks removed. She has never been identified. Story 13, 1987. Bradford, Pa, a local man went missing, along with $500,000 worth of platinum. Case was on the show Unsolved Mysteries. Copied this part from an article in the local paper. Dogs were brought in to help with the search of the vast 112,000 square foot facility. Kerstedter's scent was found around the facility, but also near the glass kiln not part of his security patrol. 4 days after Kerstetter went missing, the company's security cameras were checked. Kerstetter was on the camera, but so was a masked intruder, Graupman wrote. Company officials realized more than just Kerstetter was missing, so were platinum rods used to line the glass kiln. The masked man arrived within 10 minutes of Kerstetter's shift beginning. The two were seen talking on security footage, and at one point, Kerstetter turned and looked right at the camera. Both men walked to another part of the plant, and Kerstetter wasn't seen again, and to this day still no clues as to where he may be, or what happened to the platinum. Story 14. Andrew Gosden left home when he was 14 and was never seen again. Withdrew £200 in cash before school hours. After school, he got out his uniform, dropped off his bag, picked up his fully charged PSP, no charger, didn't take anything that could identify him, and left for London. He was adamant about not getting a return ticket and was seen once when he arrived at the station. He didn't have any friends or a phone or anything like that. He was said to be a good kid that enjoyed routine. He broke his routine twice the week he left. The main theory is that he went to go to a gig and was going to stay at his extended family in London after, but he never made it to either, as far as anyone knows. And it's not like he was lost, because his family said multiple times he'd been to London before by himself and knew the underground insanely well. His family believed that he didn't tell anyone because they would have said no, so he decided he'd go to the gig anyway, tell his extended family when he gets to their home, and ask for forgiveness later. The PSP is a huge tell that he didn't plan to leave and never come back because it's rendered useless without the charger. and the way he was dressed matches a band that was playing in London that day. Story 15. Where is Michael Dunnhe? Michael Dunnhe was at a local playground in Victoria, British Columbia, with his parents when he went missing. It was believed that he was abducted. He went missing on March 24, 1991, and has not been seen or heard from since. He was 4 years old at the time, and despite being in a very public and busy place, no viable leads have been found. Police continue in their search for answers, and to this day have received more than 11,000 tips. Story 16. This is a high-profile case in Romania, the assassination of Elodia Ginescu. On 29th of August 2007 was when Elodia was last seen alive. A few days later, her husband Cristian Chihuahua, a police officer, reported her disappearance and claimed that she had gone voluntarily. However, his conflicting statements and strange actions after she went missing made people get suspicious about him. The investigation uncovered a number of disturbing clues. The presence of bloodstains with Elodia's DNA on them were found in their apartment, as well as on Christian's uniform. Nonetheless, the corpse of Elodia has never been found. The lack of solid proof, coupled with the elusive explanations from Christian, fueled a media frenzy. Cristian Chihuahua's post-disappearance behavior only added to the riddle, and he was even caught taking away things from their flat and attempting to access Elodia's bank accounts. He was, however, sentenced to 22 years in prison for the crime in 2013, despite his continued plea of innocence and his claims that Elodia left on her own volition. There were reports that someone had used Elodia's phone to send messages several days after her disappearance. These texts therefore appeared misleading investigations into her abduction. Furthermore, alleged sightings concerning this lady in different countries have kept many people talking about it all over the world. Story 17. The most creepy, though, have to be National Park missing people cases. There was one back in the 60s, a dad and his son who was about 6, and the dad turned away for a brief moment, and when he turned back, his son was missing. No traces, no clues, nothing. They never found him. Like, huh? Insane. There's a crap load of nature out there that it's very, very easy to get lost in. Unprepared people succumb to the elements through poor planning and lack of experience. Once they die, usually of exposure or dehydration, it isn't long before their body is unrecognizable as a body and starts to blend in with the surrounding vegetation. It's very easy for searchers to be within a few meters of a body and not see it. Story 18. Another eerie and unsolved mystery is the disappearance of flight MH370. In 2014, the Malaysian passenger aircraft, a Boeing 777-200ER, vanished from radars during a flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, and its whereabouts remain unknown to this day. Following the disappearance of MH370, extensive search operations were conducted, including the use of modern technologies, underwater vehicles, and satellites, but none of the searches led to the discovery of the aircraft or its black boxes. There were 239 people on board. This case sparked numerous speculations and theories, including suggestions that the aircraft might have been hijacked, abducted, or encountered unforeseen circumstances. Despite all efforts and international attention given to this incident, the mystery of MH370's disappearance remains unsolved to this day. Story 19. Definitely not the creepiest, but a teenager disappeared in the town I lived in during high school. I only ever met him once, and he was my ex-girlfriend at the time. Back then, he came across as an emo punk, and I never really liked him because he made it a point to crap talk me, purely because he was into my old girlfriend. I don't know. I thought he was a jerk. Anyhow, he suddenly disappeared one day, not long after I'd met him. Not sure what happened to him, as he was never found. That was many years ago, and it's still an unsolved case. It's surreal that I knew the kid, and even though I didn't like him, he didn't deserve to be ended. Likely outcome. Hopefully they solve it someday for his mom's sake. Story 20. Dyatlov Pass incident. Why did they leave their tents, most of them underdressed? Investigators concluded by the footsteps that they weren't in a rush. Their tent was cut open from the inside. They also concluded that an avalanche was highly unlikely based on the actual geography and the climber's knowledge. There was no alcohol or meds in their system. Why were one of them missing their eyes and tongue? The indigenous people in the area weren't known to do such a thing. Story 21 has to be the Zodiac killer. I know it's definitely the most controversial that I know of. Everyone has their own opinion of who it is, but I personally believe that if we ever find out the answers, that we're all going to be shocked at what comes out. I also believe that the answer is unfortunately so complex that there's no way we would ever figure it out without a confession. I believe either it's multiple assassins or maybe one person wrote the letters, or maybe, my personal belief, it was someone from law enforcement, possibly even more than one person that was involved. There's a reason Zodiac was never caught. And I don't think it's because he was too smart. And no, it wasn't Arthur Lee Allen. Story 22, free will. What is it? Does it even exist? And why do I have irrational feelings about what it should be? Even though I am a strong atheist, technically it does not exist. Functionally, it does. Every choice you make is a natural consequence of all of the variables around you. Situational, environmental, experiential, biological. If we had a grasp of all of the variables, we could predict your every choice with 100% accuracy. Technically, no choice. But there are so many variables and they are so subtle that functionally you could have gone either way and made a choice informed by the variables. So functionally, yes. Story 23, Seneca guns. Where I live and other places on the East Coast and Finger Lakes, people have, since the 1800s, reported huge, loud, booming sounds. There are theories but no actual explanation. They are fairly common where I am from. Early morning or midday, I would say that I notice it 2 to 3 times a week, but sometimes multiple times in one day. It's not consistent. The leading theories, all unproven, tend to be atmospheric, geological, or seismic, underground collapses, methane bursts, things like that. But as explanations go, those all have issues that count against them. Other possible explanations include sonic booms and mining explosions or distant artillery, but those wouldn't make much sense where I am located. Story 24. It's not really a mystery, but TWA Flight 800 has been on my mind a lot recently. A plane just explodes in half 10 minutes after takeoff? Yes, we have an official explanation about what happened to the plane, some sort of mechanical failure. But if you dive further and read about the conspiracy theories surrounding this flight, multiple witnesses said they saw an ascending streak of light headed in the general direction of the plane. It's confirmed there was Navy testing, at least in the broad area, at the time. Explosive residue was found in the wreckage. I am not saying at all I believe the conspiracy theories because I am really not a conspiracy person at all. But it at least seems plausible that this could have been military testing gone horribly wrong covered up by the government. Story 25, Amelia Earhart. No plane, no body. I think the sharks got her. The ocean is vast. They couldn't even find that Malaysia flight. I think in Malaysia they found a wing or something, but no plane and not a single body. I saw a video where they thought they found Amelia's plane, but used ultrasound devices or whatever they were. Turned out to be underwater rock formations that looked like a plane. Still wondering if she got eaten, was stuck in the plane and ran out of oxygen, or if her remains are still on some island. Story 26, a cold case here in Belgium. The disappearance of Natalie Gisbrechts. 10-year-old Natalie Gisbrechts disappeared in Leafdal on 26 February 1991, and no trace has been found of her since then. Every morning, 10-year-old Natalie Gisbrechts took the bus to school from the bus stop on Tervoorsteenweg in Leafdal, about 200 meters from her home. Gisbrechts attended a special education school in Lovenjol. Normally, she walked to the bus stop, but on the morning of February 26, 1991, her father dropped her off at the bus stop. A neighbor saw Gisbrechts sitting in a gray Toyota Corolla around 7:30 a.m. A man, around 50 years old, appeared to have broken down by the roadside. He was bent over the open hood. The neighbor saw Geisbrechts gesturing to her from the car, which she found strange. After dropping off her own children at school, she decided to contact Geisbrechts' school. She was then informed that she had not arrived. The driver of the car had possibly kidnapped Geisbrechts. Geisbrechts' father, a career soldier, had just returned from a daily run. He was informed by his superior that his daughter had not arrived at school. Story 27. This isn't the creepiest. It's the first one I thought of. There was a guy who suddenly bolted out of a public facility, forgot exactly what, across the road out of camera view. I think his face was shown pretty clearly in the surveillance footage too. But he was gone. Another one was of a little kid who disappeared while on a morning paper run decades ago. His parents never gave up until he became a grown man and returned to visit his elderly mother. He was accompanied by two men who looked like either his handlers or similar. He said he worked hard to be rewarded with a few hours of visitation, but he couldn't talk about what happened to him and what he was doing all these years. He had to leave, and he never returned. Makes me wonder what insane underground organization he was forced to join and what horrors he had to endure to be rewarded. Story 28. A creepy story I heard when I was younger was about a young boy who mysteriously vanished right out of his home in my mom's village in Mexico, sometime in the 80s. The family woke up to find him not in his bed. The large wooden entry door was open and the outside gate shut and unlocked. I remember the mother panicking and wailing, begging for her child to return. He was 7 or 8. Slept in a small room with his two sisters, but nobody heard a thing. Neither his whereabouts or a body were ever found. One theory was that he may have sleepwalked right out and possibly ended up falling into a local volcanic mud pit. They are very deep and you will never recover anything that falls in there. Story 29. Bear Brook. When I listened to that, I kept noticing how much the police emphasized how isolated the dump site was, which was misleading. It was originally discovered deep in a state park, but it abutted a piece of private property that was an integral part of resolving the case. It also seemed to me that the initial police investigation didn't look into the source of the barrels. The FBI tracks a number of industrial products to help identify the manufacture of objects used in crimes. It's possible that would have been helpful here. In my area, for example, that's how they identified an arsonist. They looked at the motor oil container used in the device, traced it to a local retailer, then scoured the receipts for a purchase. Story 30. These happened in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, within the national park itself. There are quite a few disappearances in this area, but these stick out due to the fact that they were hiking with other people when they disappeared off of the trail without a trace. Dennis, age 6, disappeared while on a camping trip with family. Trenny was on a field trip with her classmates, although there are some suspicious details regarding a male classmate who was walking with her that day. Thelma was walking on a trail with a friend who mentioned that Thelma started walking faster than she was. When she turned the corner in the trail, Thelma was gone. Story 31. Audrey Mae Herron left her job as a nurse in Catskill, NY on August 29, 2002, and didn't make it home. Both her and her car have never been found. All nearby bodies of water have been checked by police and volunteer diving squads, like Adventures with Purpose, so the likelihood of it being an accident is quite low. There have been a lot of theories considered over the last 23 years, but nothing has been proven. This one hits hard because it's local to me, and our area isn't really known for crime. The fact that our Jeep was never recovered is one of the most haunting parts, I think. Some people think it was buried or crushed by whoever may be responsible for her disappearance. Story 32. This one happened in the USA. The Springfield 3, from the wiki June 7, 1992, friends Suzanne Susie Streeter and Stacy McCall, and Streeter's mother, Cheryl Levitt, went missing from Levitt's home in Missouri. All of their personal belongings, including cars and purses, were left behind. There were no signs of a struggle except a broken porch-light globe. There was also a message on the answering machine that police believe might have provided a clue about the disappearances, but it was inadvertently erased. They're Charlie Project links. Story 33. I live in a small town in South Alabama named Opp. In 1997, when I was a junior in high school, a sweet and well-known girl, Kimberly Raymer, Kem, just disappeared through the night and no one has answers. We know some people know, but they won't speak up, and the way it looks is that a couple cops here even know. Like I said, this is a very small town where everyone knows everyone and little to no crime. The FBI and a lot of unknown callers know who the guy is that took her, but don't have enough evidence, and that guy's father is also a cop in Walton Co. in Florida. If anyone wants to see and hear more about her disappearance, there is a Facebook page, Kimberly Raymer. She was 17 years old and she was supposed to get her cap and gown pics the next morning. We all have played softball together and she was honestly the sweetest girl. I wish we could get someone that is good at finding people to help, especially her dear mother. Story 34. The creepiest I've read was about the two girls who went to Panama. In April 2014, two Dutch tourists named Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon went hiking in Panama and never returned. Months later, officials found their bleached bones and disturbing pictures. The details are honestly like out of a horror story. Their backpack was eventually found with their camera and both their cell phones inside with creepy pictures on them. They also found one of the girls' clothes along a river, folded neatly. Then parts of their bodies were found where one of the girls' bones looked bleached. The simplest explanation is that they got lost and succumbed to the elements, but who knows for sure what really happened. Story 35. Ali Lowitzer. She was a teenager who vanished in Spring, Texas in 2010 after getting off the bus and calling her mom to let her know she was going to pick up her paycheck at a nearby burger place. She was never seen or heard from again. At the time, I lived just a block away from where she vanished, and law enforcement was notoriously terrible about missing kids. They were almost always labeled as runaways, or the investigation was half-assed at best. The family, at one point, hired a PI who claimed to have seen Ali at a trafficking house in Ohio, but it wasn't her. Some theories hold that Ali may have been taken and ended by Brandon Laverne, a Louisiana assassin who allegedly went into Texas a few times, and who, incidentally, took out my good friend's best friend Mickey Shunick. The case is cold now from what I understand, but the way she just vanished off the street and no one saw or heard anything, allegedly, will always haunt me.